In the silence of the night, when the world sleeps and hearts are most vulnerable, unseen battles unfold. This is not a story told to frighten children or entertain minds. This is a moment from Islamic history that reveals how close danger once came and how divine protection stood unbreakable. There was a night when Satan believed he had found an opening. A moment of darkness, a moment of stillness, a moment when he dared to approach the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, with evil intent. The Prophet, peace be upon him, lived a life of simplicity. His nights were not filled with luxury or guards. Often, he slept on a simple mat in a quiet home with complete trust in Allah. This trust was not ignorance of danger. It was certainty in divine protection. Satan, who observes human weakness closely, believed night was his opportunity. Darkness is where fear grows. Silence is where whispers become louder. And Satan works best when humans feel alone. Islamic narrations tell us that Satan does not sleep. He watches. He waits. He looks for moments when faith might weaken. But with the Prophet, peace be upon him, faith never weakened. Still, Satan tried. Not because he believed he would succeed, but because his mission is to attempt corruption, distraction, and harm whenever possible. That night, Satan approached with the intention to disturb, to frighten, and to harm. The Prophet, peace be upon him, sensed something unusual, a presence that did not belong. Not with fear, but with awareness. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was granted a level of spiritual perception beyond ordinary humans. He knew when something unseen moved near. And instead of panic, he turned to Allah. This is where the story shifts from danger to power. The Prophet, peace be upon him, began reciting words of remembrance, words that burned Satan. Words that close doors Satan tries to open. Satan's strength does not lie in physical force, but in deception and fear. And fear dies instantly in the presence of Allah's remembrance. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did not raise his voice in anger. He raised his heart in connection. In some narrations, the Prophet, peace be upon him, later described how Satan attempted to disturb him during prayer at night. This was not a random act. Satan targets worship. He attacks at moments of closeness to Allah because that closeness threatens him most. But the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not stop praying. He did not break his focus. Instead, he continued until the presence weakened. This moment teaches something critical. Satan does not always appear with dramatic signs. Often he comes quietly, through restlessness, through sudden fear, through intrusive thoughts, through distraction. That night, Satan tried to use darkness as a cover, but darkness has no power where light of faith exists. Allah's protection around his messenger, peace be upon him, was not passive. It was active, constant, and overwhelming. Angels were sent to guard him. Divine boundaries surrounded him. Satan could approach, but he could not cross. He could observe, but he could not touch. And that realization crushed him. Imagine the humiliation. Satan, who once refused to bow to Adam, standing powerless before a man sleeping in peace. A man whose trust in Allah turned night into safety. This is not just about Satan failing. This is about the level of honor Allah granted his Prophet, peace be upon him. Later, the Prophet, peace be upon him, explained to his companions that Satan's attempts were real, but Allah's protection was greater. This honesty teaches us something important. Islam does not deny danger. It teaches us how to overcome it. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did not say Satan never tries. He showed us that Satan fails when Allah is remembered. If you are feeling the intensity of this moment, take a second to support Ruhani Stories TV by liking this video. It helps bring authentic Islamic stories like this to more hearts across the world. That night passed. The Prophet, peace be upon him, rested peacefully. Satan retreated, weakened, and defeated, but the lesson remained for the Ummah. Night is not dangerous for believers who remember Allah. Silence is not frightening for hearts connected to Him. Satan feeds on neglect, not on awareness. This incident also reminds us that the prophet, peace be upon him, faced unseen struggles so that his ummah would learn how to face theirs. He taught us that protection does not come from strength, weapons, or walls. It comes from remembrance, trust, and consistency in worship. Satan failed that night, but he did not stop trying with humanity. And this is where the story becomes personal. Because the same Satan who failed near the prophet, peace be upon him, still whispers to believers today. But the same protection that guarded the prophet, peace be upon him, is available to those who follow his path. What happened next reveals even deeper truths about Satan's limits, Allah's power, and why this incident still matters today. That night was not an isolated incident. It revealed a pattern that runs throughout the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Satan did not stop at one attempt. He tested boundaries repeatedly, not because he believed he could overpower the Prophet, peace be upon him, but because his mission demanded resistance until the very end. Every failed attempt only confirmed one truth: divine protection cannot be broken. The Prophet, peace be upon him, later spoke openly about Satan's interference during worship. He described how Satan would come during prayer, attempting to distract, confuse, or interrupt focus. This honesty is important. It shows that Satan does not only target sinners. He targets the most righteous, because their connection to Allah threatens his existence. But each time Satan approached, he was defeated not by force but by remembrance. One narration describes how Satan once tried to physically interfere during the prophet's night prayer. The prophet, peace be upon him, continued praying, fully aware, until Satan weakened. In another narration, the prophet, peace be upon him, mentioned that he was granted control over Satan in that moment, but he chose mercy and restraint, remembering the prayer of Prophet Suleiman. This detail alone shows the moral power of the prophet, peace be upon him. Even when given dominance, he chose wisdom over revenge. This is where the story reaches a deeper spiritual level. Satan's greatest strength is provoking reaction: fear, anger, panic. But the prophet, peace be upon him, never reacted emotionally. He responded spiritually. This difference changes everything. Satan expects chaos. He finds calm. He expects fear. He finds certainty. He expects isolation. He finds divine presence. Nighttime worship holds a special place in Islam. It is quiet, private, and sincere, and that is exactly why Satan attacks it. When a believer stands alone before Allah in the dark, Satan loses influence over that heart. That is why the prophet, peace be upon him, encouraged night prayers, remembrance before sleep, and specific supplications for protection. These practices were not rituals. They were shields. The prophet, peace be upon him, taught his companions to recite certain verses before sleeping. Ayatul Kursi, the last two verses of Surah al-Baqarah, the Mawidhat. These were not random selections. They were divinely revealed protections against the unseen. The prophet, peace be upon him, lived these teachings before passing them on. That night, his actions were the lesson. Satan believed darkness would help him, but darkness only exposes those who rely on themselves. The prophet, peace be upon him, relied entirely on Allah. This reliance did not make him careless. It made him unshakable. Satan could approach, but he could not influence. He could attempt, but he could not succeed. This incident also reveals Satan's desperation. To approach the prophet, peace be upon him, directly shows how threatened he was. Islam was spreading. Hearts were awakening. Truth was dismantling falsehood. Satan saw his influence shrinking. And when power slips away, desperation grows. Yet Allah allowed Satan's attempt to be witnessed and later shared, not to glorify Satan, but to expose his weakness. Satan's power depends on ignorance. Once exposed, he loses authority. The prophet, peace be upon him, did not hide these encounters. He explained them so the Ummah would understand the enemy clearly. This story also corrects a dangerous misconception. Being close to Allah does not mean Satan disappears. It means Satan loses effectiveness. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was the closest human to Allah, yet Satan still tried. The difference is that Satan could not succeed. This teaches believers not to be shocked by whispers or challenges, but to respond correctly. If this story is reshaping how you understand spiritual struggle, support Ruhani Stories TV by subscribing. This channel exists to uncover truths that strengthen faith, not to create fear, but clarity. The Prophet, peace be upon him, turned every attack into a lesson. He showed that protection is built through consistency, daily remembrance, night prayers, trust in Allah. Satan looks for gaps. The Prophet, peace be upon him, left none. As dawn approached, peace returned, not because danger disappeared, but because Allah's protection remained constant. Satan withdrew, weakened by failure. The night ended, but the message remained. Those who remember Allah are never alone, even in the deepest darkness. But this was not the end of Satan's attempts. Nor was it the final lesson for the Ummah. What happened next reveals why this incident matters today more than ever, and how believers can protect themselves in a world filled with distractions, fear, and unseen battles. The night when Satan tried to approach the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not meant to create fear in the hearts of believers. It was meant to create clarity. It exposed a truth that many forget today. Satan's power is limited, controlled, and fragile in the presence of Allah. What protects a believer is not isolation from danger, but connection to the Creator. The Prophet, peace be upon him, did not survive that night because of walls, weapons, or guards. He survived because of remembrance. This is the most uncomfortable reality for Satan. He does not lose to strength. He loses to sincerity. He does not retreat from noise. He retreats from certainty. That night the Prophet, peace be upon him, rested in complete trust, and that trust itself became a shield. This incident also reshapes how we view fear. Satan uses fear to freeze the heart. The Prophet, peace be upon him, used awareness to strengthen it. Fear says you are alone. Faith says Allah is near. Satan whispers vulnerability. Faith responds with remembrance. His exchange happens every night in the lives of believers, whether they realize it or not. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught that before sleep, a believer should place their trust entirely in Allah, not symbolically, completely. Sleep is a small form of surrender. Control is released. Awareness lowers. Satan believes this is his advantage, but Islam turns surrender into strength when it is directed to Allah. This is why the Prophet, peace be upon him, emphasized nightly supplications, not as superstition, as strategy. The unseen world responds to remembrance. Angels draw closer. Satan retreats. The Prophet, peace be upon him, lived this reality before teaching it. That night was proof. What makes this story even more powerful is that Allah allowed the Prophet, peace be upon him, to share it openly. He did not hide the attempt. He exposed it, because exposure weakens Satan. When believers understand the enemy, fear dissolves and responsibility takes its place. The Prophet, peace be upon him, showed us that spiritual strength is not measured by how rarely Satan whispers, but by how ineffective those whispers become. Satan may come, but he does not control outcomes. Allah does. That night, Satan learned again what he already knew but hated to accept. Allah's protection is absolute. For the modern believer, this story is deeply relevant. We live in a world filled with noise, distraction, anxiety, and spiritual exhaustion. Nights are no longer quiet. Screens glow. Minds race. Hearts feel restless. Satan does not always appear as fear anymore. Sometimes he appears as distraction, laziness, doubt, or numbness, but the protection remains the same: remembrance before sleep. Trust in Allah, consistency in prayer. These are not outdated rituals. They are timeless defenses. The Prophet, peace be upon him, faced Satan directly so his Ummah would never face him unarmed. The lesson is not that Satan once failed. The lesson is that Satan always fails against those who follow the prophetic path. He may try, he may whisper, he may disturb, but he cannot dominate a heart anchored in Allah. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did not live a protected life to distance himself from struggle. He lived a protected life to teach us how to survive ours. That night was not about danger. It was about dominance. Not physical dominance, but spiritual authority. And this is where the story leaves us with a choice. Night will come again. Silence will return. Satan will whisper again. The question is not whether he will try. The question is whether we will respond the way the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us to. If this story strengthened your faith, reminded you of Allah's protection, or changed how you view spiritual struggle, then stay connected with Ruhani Stories TV. Subscribe to the channel for more authentic Islamic stories that don't just inform, but transform. Stories that awaken hearts, strengthen Iman, and reconnect us to the legacy of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Remember this before you sleep tonight. You are not alone in the dark. Allah is nearer than you think, and Satan is weaker than he wants you to believe.